In the heart of Washington, D.C., inside the Smithsonian Museum, sits the most visited object in the world, second only to the Mona Lisa. It rests behind 3 inches of bulletproof glass, rotating slowly on a pedestal of velvet. It is small, weighing just over 45 carats, but its color is what stops the crowds in their tracks. It is not the bright, happy blue of a summer sky. It is the deep, suffocating blue of the ocean floor, a steel gray darkness that seems to trap the light rather than reflect it. This is the Hope Diamond. To the millions of tourists who press their faces against the glass every year, it is just a beautiful rock, a miracle of geology. They take their photos, they marvel at the price tag, estimated at over $350 million, and they move on to the dinosaur bones, but they only see the beauty. They do not see the blood. Stop and ask yourself, can an object truly be evil? Or is it simply a mirror that reflects the greed of the people who own it? History tells us that every hand this stone has touched has withered. It belonged to kings of France who were beheaded. It belonged to sultans who were deposed. But its favorite victim was not a queen or a king. It was an American woman who believed that her money was a shield strong enough to protect her from fate. This is not just a story about a diamond. It is the story of the McLean Dynasty, a family that had everything America could offer: oil, gold, newspapers, and power. And how they traded it all for a blue stone that sat heavy around a woman's neck, watching silently as her entire world burned to the ground. To understand the end, we must understand the beginning. Before she was the Grand Dame of Washington society, dripping in gems, Evalyn Walsh was a child of the dirt. She was born in 1886 in Colorado, not in a palace, but in a mining camp. Her father, Thomas Walsh, was an Irish immigrant, a carpenter by trade, obsessed with the American dream of striking it rich. For years, the family lived on the edge of poverty. Evalyn's first memories were not of perfumes and parties, but of the smell of dynamite and the biting cold of the Rocky Mountains. But Thomas Walsh was different from the other dreamers. He had an instinct. In 1896, he bought a claim that everyone else had rejected, a place called the Camp Bird Mine. Geologists told him there was nothing there. They were wrong. Walsh struck a vein of gold so pure, so massive, that it essentially turned his family into royalty overnight. They weren't just rich, they were staggeringly, violently wealthy. The mine produced millions of dollars a year, in a time when a loaf of bread cost a penny. Imagine that transition for a moment. One day you are worried about the price of firewood. The next day you can buy the forest. This kind of sudden, explosive wealth does something to the human mind. It creates a sense of invincibility. Evalyn Walsh grew up believing that miracles were real and that her father could pull magic out of the ground. She learned early on that money was the answer to every question and the cure for every pain. It was a lesson that would eventually destroy her. The Walsh family moved from the mining camp to Washington, D.C., and they brought their new money with them like a battering ram. They built a mansion that cost $835,000 in 1903. They entertained presidents. They traveled to Europe in private suites on ocean liners. Evalyn, the rough tomboy from Colorado, was polished, scrubbed, and dressed in the finest silks from Paris. But beneath the diamonds and the finishing school manners, she was still wild. She was bored by the polite rules of society. She craved excitement. She craved danger. And then she found her match. In 1908, Evalyn married Edward Ned Beale McLean. If Evalyn was the Princess of Gold, Ned was the Prince of the Press. He was the heir to the Washington Post and the Cincinnati Enquirer fortune. His family was old money, established and powerful. Their wedding was the union of two colossal fortunes. It was the merger of the century. The press went wild. They were the golden couple, young, beautiful, and possessing a combined wealth of nearly $100 million. On paper, they had it all. For their honeymoon, they didn't just book a hotel room, they toured the world in a haze of spending that shocked even the aristocracy of Europe. They bought cars they drove once, they bought clothes they never wore. Evalyn famously said, "My father struck gold, but I struck luck." But look closer at the photos of Ned McLean. Behind the smile, there is a glaze in the eyes. Ned was a man crumbling under the pressure of his own name. He was an alcoholic from a young age, a man who had never worked a day in his life and had no purpose other than to spend. Evalyn, with her frantic energy, and Ned, with his instability, were a volatile mixture. They were two children locked in a candy store with no supervision, gorging themselves on luxury until they felt sick. This is the checkpoint where we must pause. We often look at the wealthy with envy. We see the mansions and the cars and think, if I had that, I would be happy. But Evalyn and Ned prove a darker truth. Boredom is a dangerous poison. When you can buy anything, nothing has value anymore. You start looking for things that money shouldn't be able to buy. You start looking for thrills that defy logic. You start tempting fate. By 1910, the golden couple was back in Washington. And they were bored. The parties, the mansions, the endless stream of yes men. It wasn't enough. Evalyn needed a new toy. She needed something that would make her not just rich, but legendary. It was in this state of mind, restless, arrogant, and swimming in cash, that they travelled back to Paris. And waiting for them there, like a spider in a web of velvet, was the famous jeweller Pierre Cartier. Cartier was a brilliant businessman. He knew he couldn't sell Evalyn a normal diamond. She had buckets of diamonds. She had tiaras for breakfast. No, to catch the interest of the woman who had everything, he had to offer her something she didn't have. He had to offer her a story, a legend, a curse. Cartier invited Evalyn to his private salon. He didn't bring out the diamond immediately. First, he told her the tale. He lowered his voice and spoke of a blue stone torn from the eye of an idol in India. He spoke of the French merchant Tavernier, torn apart by wild dogs. He spoke of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, dragged to the guillotine. He spoke of suicides, bankruptcies, and madness. He painted a picture of a stone that drank the life of its owners. Only then, after he had terrified her, did he reveal the Hope Diamond. Most people would have backed away. Most people would have felt a chill run down their spine and left the shop. But Cartier knew his client. He saw the spark in Evalyn's eyes. It wasn't fear, it was challenge. She looked at that cold blue stone, carrying the weight of centuries of death, and she didn't see a threat. She saw a pet to be tamed. She looked at Cartier and smiled. She famously told him, "Bad luck for you, maybe, but things that are bad luck for others are good luck for me." And there it is, the moment the trap snapped shut. It wasn't the diamond that sealed her fate, it was her hubris. It was the arrogance of believing that her checkbook was powerful enough to rewrite history. She didn't buy the Hope Diamond because it was pretty. She bought it because it was dangerous. She put it around her neck like a dare to the universe. But as Evalyn was about to discover, the universe rarely loses a dare. She negotiated the price, $180,000, about $5 million today, and prepared to bring the stone to America. The golden couple was returning home with a new passenger. They thought they were bringing back a souvenir. In reality, they were smuggling a Trojan horse into their own dynasty. The curse had crossed the ocean, and it was hungry. The journey of the Hope Diamond from the velvet counters of Paris to the drawing rooms of Washington, D.C. was more than just a transaction. It was a coronation. When Evalyn Walsh McLean stepped off the ocean liner in 1911, the blue stone around her neck didn't just sparkle, it screamed. The American press, always hungry for a story that mixed extreme wealth with a hint of danger, went into a frenzy. They wrote about the curse with a mixture of skepticism and glee, wondering aloud how long the golden couple could outrun the dark history of their new toy. But Evalyn was basking in the attention. She felt invincible. To her, the diamond wasn't a death sentence. It was the ultimate trophy, a symbol that she had conquered not just the social ladder, but fear itself. However, beneath the bravado, there was a flicker of hesitation. It is telling that one of the first things Evalyn did upon bringing the diamond home was not to show it off at a ball, but to take it to a church. In a scene that feels almost cinematic in its foreshadowing, she asked a priest to bless the stone. She wanted the holy water to wash away the sins of the French kings and the Indian idols. Legend has it that as the priest raised his hand to bless the cursed rock, a sudden, violent thunderstorm broke over the church, lightning illuminating the stained glass in jagged flashes. Most people would have taken that as a final warning from God to throw the thing into the ocean. Evalyn simply adjusted her hat, thanked the priest, and walked back out into the rain. She had done her due diligence. Now the party could begin. And what a party it was. For the next few years, the Hope Diamond became the center of a solar system of excess that is almost impossible for us to comprehend today. The McLeans lived at Friendship, a sprawling estate in the countryside outside of Washington. It was less a house and more a private kingdom. Here, the rules of reality did not apply. Life was a blurred merry-go-round of champagne, politics, and manic energy. Senators, ambassadors, and socialites flocked to Friendship not just for the food, but to be close to the electric aura of the McLeans. Evalyn treated the most dangerous diamond in the world with a casual disrespect that was almost shocking. She didn't keep it in a vault. She treated it like costume jewelry. She wore it while swimming in the pool. She wore it while gardening. In moments of drunken whimsy during her legendary dinner parties, she would play a game called Find the Hope. She would hide the multi-million-dollar gem somewhere in the drawing room, tucked behind a sofa cushion or stuffed inside a vase of flowers, and shriek with laughter as the most powerful men in America scrambled on their hands and knees to find it. There is a specific kind of madness that sets in when you lose all respect for value. One of the most enduring images of this era is of Evalyn's Great Dane, a massive beast named Mike. Evalyn would frequently fasten the Hope Diamond around the dog's neck, letting the priceless blue stone bounce against his fur as he trotted around the garden. To her, it was a joke, a way to show the world that she was so rich, so untouchable, that the jewel of kings was fit for a dog. But looking back, it feels less like a joke and more like a desperate attempt to trivialize the darkness she had invited into her home. It creates a psychological checkpoint for us as observers. When we see someone mocking fate this loudly, we know, instinctively, that fate is preparing a brutal response. For a while, the good luck Evalyn had promised seemed to hold. She gave birth to a son, Vincent Walsh McLean. He was immediately dubbed the $100 million baby by the newspapers. He was the heir to everything, the gold mines, the newspapers, the estates. He was a beautiful, golden-haired child who slept in a crib gifted by the King of Belgium. President Harding was a regular guest at the house. The McLeans were the unofficial royalty of America. The diamond shone brightly at every gala, its blue fire reflecting the flashbulbs of the paparazzi. It seemed that Pierre Cartier had been wrong. The curse was a myth, but curses, if they exist, are patient. They do not strike when you are wary, they strike when you are comfortable. Slowly the cracks began to appear in the golden facade. hairline fractures that would soon shatter the entire structure. The first casualty was the marriage. Ned McLean, the prince of the press, was deteriorating. The alcohol, which had once been a social lubricant, was now a necessity. He began to drink with a dark, self-destructive intensity. He became erratic, disappearing for days, spending money with a ferocity that alarmed even the banks. The love story that had started with a honeymoon tour of Europe was dissolving into shouting matches in empty hallways. Evalyn, too, was changing. The manic energy of the parties began to look less like joy and more like hysteria. She was running faster and faster, trying to stay ahead of a silence she couldn't bear to hear. She kept the diamond close, wearing it constantly, rubbing her thumb over its cold facets as if it were a talisman. She wrote in her memoirs that she felt a strange connection to the stone, a heavy, pulsing energy that she couldn't explain. It was as if the diamond was feeding on the chaos of the house, growing brighter as the family grew darker. Then came the year 1919, at the dawn of the decade that would roar for the rest of the country, but would scream for the McLeans. Vincent, the $100 million baby, was now 9 years old. He was the light of Evalyn's life, the one pure thing in a world of transactional friendships and cold gems. Because he was so precious, and perhaps because Evalyn sensed the shadow over her house, Vincent was guarded like a prisoner. He had bodyguards, he had nurses, he was rarely allowed out of sight. But on a crisp spring day, a lapse in judgment occurred. A gate was left open. A guard looked away for a split second. Vincent, full of the energy of childhood, ran out into the street in front of their house. He didn't see the car coming. The impact was not just physical, it was the sledgehammer blow that shattered the McLean dynasty forever. Vincent didn't die immediately. He lingered for hours while Evalyn and Ned stood by his bedside, helpless, watching their future bleed away. All the gold in the Colorado mines couldn't buy a miracle. All the influence of the Washington Post couldn't stop the inevitable. When the boy took his last breath, the silence that fell over Friendship Estate was heavy enough to crush the soul. This is the moment the narrative shifts. This is the moment the curse stopped being a dinner party anecdote and became a terrifying reality. Evalyn, in her grief, did not blame the car, she did not blame the driver. In the dark recesses of her mind, she looked at the blue stone sitting on her vanity table, glowing with that indifferent, eternal light. She remembered the priest's blessing during the thunderstorm. She remembered Cartier's warnings about the French queen who lost her head and the sultan who lost his throne. She realized, with a horror that would never leave her, that the first payment had been collected. But here is the most twisting part of the human psychology. She didn't sell the diamond. A rational person would have thrown it into the deepest part of the Atlantic Ocean. But grief is not rational. Instead of rejecting the stone, Evalyn clung to it. She began to wear it even more. It was as if she was defying the curse to take more, or perhaps she felt that since the diamond had taken her son, it was now the only thing she had left that was powerful enough to contain her pain. The party was over. The lights at Friendship were dimmed, and in the shadows the Hope diamond waited patiently for the next payment, because the bill for hubris is rarely settled with just one life. If the death of Vincent was the lightning strike that cracked the foundation of the McLean dynasty, the years that followed were the slow, rotting decay of the structure itself. Grief is a heavy door. Some people walk through it and come out stronger, but others are crushed behind it. Ned McLean was crushed. The loss of his son broke something vital inside him. The erratic behavior that had once been dismissed as the eccentricity of a rich heir now spiraled into a dark, terrifying madness. He retreated into a bottle, drinking with a ferocity that suggested he was trying to drown a memory that wouldn't die. The decline of Ned McLean was public, humiliating, and absolute. The man who owned the Washington Post, one of the most powerful megaphones in the world, began to lose his grip on reality. He became involved in the infamous Teapot Dome scandal, disgracing the family name in the halls of Congress. His infidelity ceased to be discreet. It became flagrant. But worse than the scandals was the madness. He began to hallucinate, seeing enemies in the shadows of their vast estate. Finally, the family had no choice. The Prince of the Press was declared insane and committed to a psychiatric sanitarium. He died there, alone, screaming at ghosts, a broken shell of the man who had once honeymooned like a king across Europe. The diamond had outlasted its first master. With Ned gone and the Great Depression clawing at the throat of America, the unthinkable happened. The money ran out. It seems impossible that a fortune of that magnitude could evaporate, but the McLeans had spent money as if it were water, and they had never learned how to turn off the tap. To pay off the mounting debts, the unthinkable happened. The Washington Post was sold at a bankruptcy auction. The family legacy was stripped away for pennies on the dollar. The golden couple was no longer golden. They were a cautionary tale whispered about in the drawing rooms of D.C., a story of excess punished by ruin. Through all of this, the madness of her husband, the loss of her fortune, the humiliation of bankruptcy, Evalyn remained in the cavernous halls of friendship, clutching the hope diamond. But she was not the same woman. She had found a new way to cope with the silence of the house. Evalyn had become addicted to morphine. It creates a haunting image. The former queen of society, drifting through the empty rooms of her mansion, wearing $1 million worth of diamonds around her neck, but with eyes pinned by narcotics. She became a nocturnal creature, a ghost in her own home. She would often wear the Hope diamond over her pajamas, sitting alone at a dining table that was no longer set for presidents, staring into the blue depths of the stone. In her drug-induced haze, she convinced herself that she was the only one strong enough to contain the diamond's evil. She believed she was a martyr, wearing the curse so it wouldn't hurt anyone else. It was a delusion born of trauma, a desperate attempt to give meaning to the senseless destruction of her life. But the diamond was not done. It demanded one final payment, the cruelest of all. Evalyn's daughter, Evie, was the last hope of the family. She was 25 years old, beautiful, and the only person left who could perhaps rebuild the McLean legacy. Evalyn adored her. She projected all her remaining love onto this young woman, but in 1946 the pattern repeated itself with sickening precision. Evie was found dead in her apartment. The cause was an overdose of sleeping pills. Whether it was accidental or a suicide, the result was the same. The curse had claimed the next generation. The shock of losing her daughter, so many years after losing her son, broke the last remaining pillar of Evalyn's spirit. She was now a woman surrounded by graves. Her father, the gold miner, her husband, the newspaper tycoon, her son, the heir, and now her daughter. Everyone she had ever loved was gone. The only thing that remained, pristine and untouched by time or tragedy, was the blue stone. There is a terrifying clarity in realizing that objects are immortal while people are not. The Hope diamond looked exactly the same the day Evie died as it did the day Cartier sold it in Paris. It hadn't aged, it hadn't suffered, it had simply witnessed. It sat on Evalyn's vanity, reflecting the face of a woman who had aged 1,000 years in a single lifetime. The good luck she had arrogantly claimed decades earlier had been revealed as a cruel joke. The stone hadn't brought her luck, it had brought her solitude. It had systematically removed every human obstacle until it was the only thing left in her life. By 1947, Evalyn Walsh McLean was dying. Her body, worn out by morphine and grief, was finally giving up. As she lay in her bed, surrounded by the fading grandeur of a dynasty that had crumbled into dust, the creditors were already circling the gates like vultures. They were waiting to dismantle what was left. The furniture, the art, the land, it would all go. But the big prize, the blue heart of the tragedy, was waiting for its next journey. Evalyn passed away, leaving behind a legacy of ruin. And for the first time in nearly 40 years, the Hope Diamond was taken from her neck. It was cold to the touch. It did not mourn her. It was ready to move on. When Evalyn Walsh McLean took her final breath in 1947, the spell was broken. The golden couple was gone. The parties were over. And what remained was not a legacy of triumph, but a mountain of debt. The McLean estate, once valued in the tens of millions, was now a carcass being picked clean by creditors. To satisfy the demands of the banks and the taxmen, the family's possessions had to be liquidated. The furniture, the silver, the art, everything went to the auction block. But the crown jewel, the source of all the fascination and the fear, required a special buyer. Enter Harry Winston, the famous New York jeweler. Winston was a man of business, not superstition. He looked at the Hope Diamond and didn't see a curse. He saw a marketing opportunity. In 1949, he purchased Evalyn's entire jewelry collection, including the Star of the East and the Hope Diamond. The King of Diamonds now held the Queen of Curses. For the next 9 years, the stone toured the world. Winston displayed it at fairs and charity events, letting the public gaze into the blue abyss that had allegedly destroyed the French monarchy and the McLean Dynasty. But Winston knew that a stone like this could never truly belong to one person again. Its history was too heavy, its reputation was too dark. It belonged to history. And so in 1958 he made the decision to donate the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., giving it to the American people as a gift. But the diamond had one final, ironic twist to play. One last act of defiance against the concept of value. On November 10, 1958, the most expensive, most famous, and most cursed object on the planet needed to travel from New York to Washington. You would expect an armored convoy. You would expect a team of armed guards, a helicopter, a secret route. But Harry Winston was a practical man. He trusted the United States federal government. In a move that remains one of the most baffling facts in history, Harry Winston wrapped the Hope Diamond, worth hundreds of millions of dollars today, in plain brown paper. He put it in a simple cardboard box, and he walked into a post office. He mailed the Hope Diamond via registered first-class U.S. mail. The cost of postage? $2.44. It is an image that defies logic. The stone that had bought and sold kings, the stone that had cost Evalyn McLean her fortune and her sanity, travelling in a mail truck alongside love letters and utility bills. It arrived safely in Washington, D.C., delivered by a postman named James Todd, but the legend of the curse refused to die quietly. In a chilling postscript that lovers of the supernatural point to as proof, consider the fate of the mailman. James Todd delivered the package safely. But shortly after handing over the diamond, his leg was crushed in a truck accident. Then his wife died of a sudden heart attack. And finally, his house burned down. Was it just a run of terrible luck? Or was it the diamond's way of lashing out one last time because it was being put in a cage? Today, the Hope Diamond sits in the Harry Winston Gallery at the Smithsonian. It rotates slowly inside a glass vault that is bomb-proof and theft-proof. It is safe. It can no longer hurt anyone, or so we think. Every year, millions of people walk past it. They press their faces against the glass, mesmerized by that deep, impossible blue. They read the plaque that mentions Evalyn Walsh McLean. But a plaque is a small thing. It cannot contain the magnitude of the tragedy. It doesn't scream about the gold mines of Colorado, the morphine addiction, the madness of Ned, or the boy who died in the street. The McLean Dynasty is gone. Their mansions have been demolished or turned into housing developments. Their newspaper belongs to others. Their name is fading from memory. But the stone remains. It is exactly as it was 1 billion years ago deep in the earth, and exactly as it will be 1 billion years from now. The story of Evalyn Walsh McLean is not really a story about a curse. It is a story about the ultimate vanity of human beings. We think we can own things. We think that if we buy a diamond, it belongs to us. But the Hope diamond proves the opposite. We are temporary, we are fragile, we break, we bleed, and we die. The diamond is the only thing that lasts. Evalyn Walsh McLean once said, "Bad luck for you, good luck for me." She was wrong. There is no luck in the presence of something eternal. There is only the cold, blue indifference of a stone that has watched empires rise and fall, and is simply waiting for the next fool to try and claim it.